The growing tension inside the Republican Party reached a boiling point this week as internal divisions sharpened and frustration over Donald Trump's mounting political and legal troubles spread across every faction of the GOP. What began as quiet grumbling behind closed doors has now turned into an open confrontation as lawmakers, advisors, strategists and donors publicly question whether the former president's increasingly chaotic presence is damaging the party beyond repair. The collapse that many insiders say has been slowly forming for months is now taking a visible shape, with deep fractures emerging in states where Republicans were once united. For weeks, senior aides had insisted that any narrative of collapse was exaggerated and driven by external critics who had long hoped to see Trump's influence weaken. But the reality inside Republican offices paints a dramatically different picture. Staffers have described meetings filled with raised voices, advisors offering contradictory guidance, and candidates running in upcoming races left unsure whether aligning with Trump is politically safe or politically lethal. None of those concerns slowed the former president, who escalated his attacks against fellow Republicans, accusing them of disloyalty and weakness. That escalation has only pushed more of them to openly defy him. Longtime strategists say this moment was inevitable. Every major political movement, fueled by a single dominant personality, faces a breaking point when circumstances shift and loyalty can no longer compensate for declining influence. Many Republicans who once relied on Trump's endorsement and voter mobilization machinery now fear that his growing list of legal battles and erratic commentary has turned from a political asset into a political threat. When a party senses vulnerability, especially ahead of a major election, the instinct is to distance itself and reorient around new power centers. What is happening now is a classic example of that dynamic. This week, a shift became apparent when several Republican senators met privately to discuss the party's messaging strategy for the next phase of the campaign season. For the first time, aides say that conversation revolved less around how to support Trump and more around how to shield the party from the fallout of his controversies. At least 3 senators argued that the party needed to be ready for the possibility that Trump becomes a liability rather than a leader. Others pressed for a selective distancing approach where candidates would echo his base energizing themes but avoid tying themselves personally to his mounting controversies. At the same time, governors in key battleground states have been increasingly frustrated by the national party's conflicting signals. One Midwestern governor privately expressed concern that Trump's latest outbursts were overwhelming the party's efforts to focus on economic contrasts with Democrats. He said that every time his state tried to push forward a message on jobs, infrastructure, or tax relief, the national conversation would swing back to Trump's courtroom battles, overshadowing the issues voters actually cared about. Another governor warned that relying solely on Trump to mobilize conservative voters ignored the shifting demographics in suburban areas where his approval has steadily declined. Behind all the political messaging problems lies a deeper issue. The GOP is no longer functioning as a unified organization. It has become a collection of factions, each convinced that its interpretation of the future is the only path to survival. On one side are the hardliner supporters, who insist that any move away from Trump would represent a betrayal of the voters who brought the party its recent victories. On the other are conservatives, who argue that the party must evolve to avoid losing ground nationally. And then there are the pragmatists who simply want to win elections and are exhausted by the constant crisis management that follows Trump everywhere he goes. Even within the Trump orbit, cracks are emerging. Several advisors have reportedly expressed concern that the former president's decision-making has become reactive rather than strategic. Instead of focusing on a coherent plan to expand the party's coalition, he has leaned ever more heavily into grievance-driven messaging that plays well to his most loyal followers but alienates broader audiences. Those advisors warn that infighting between Trump and other Republican leaders only amplifies the sense of disarray and emboldens opponents who see an opportunity to take advantage of the division. Republican donors, too, are reassessing their commitments. Some of the party's biggest financial backers have shifted money toward down-ballot races in an effort to preserve Republican strength at the state and local levels, even if the national picture becomes more unpredictable. A few have quietly begun supporting alternative presidential contenders, signaling that they are no longer confident in Trump's ability to carry the party through another cycle. This donor movement may be one of the most significant indicators of the shifting political tide. For years, financial power in the GOP aligned overwhelmingly with Trump. Now that grip appears to be loosening. Key Republican operatives are also sounding alarms about party infrastructure. They worry that staff recruitment, fundraising, punctuality and voter outreach operations have been slowed by the constant turbulence surrounding Trump. A former senior RNC official said that any national organization functions best when leadership provides a clear, stable direction, yet the current environment offers the opposite. With every controversy, the party is forced into damage control, draining time, energy and resources from its long-term planning. As the collapse narrative grows, the former president has doubled down on attacking those he sees as disloyal. In public appearances, he has accused fellow Republicans of weakness, cowardice, and secretly hoping for his downfall. His base reacts strongly to such rhetoric, but the broader effect is further alienation of party officials who feel targeted. One congressman who has supported Trump for years privately told aides that he could no longer endure the constant tension between loyalty to the former president and loyalty to his constituents, who are increasingly exhausted by the national drama. Whenever parties face internal breakdowns, the question becomes whether compromise is possible. At this moment, compromise within the GOP appears increasingly unlikely. Those who want to move on from Trump believe that his influence is collapsing and that he is dragging the party down with him. Those who remain loyal believe that any attempt to push him aside would be a betrayal that would fracture the party even more severely. Both sides think they are fighting for the party's survival, which makes retreat impossible. Political analysts say that when internal conflict reaches this stage, it often leads to a realignment. Some insiders envision a Republican Party where Trump still has influence but no longer dominates leadership. Others imagine a scenario where pro-Trump forces split from the traditional party structure entirely, creating a new political polarization within the right. For now, these ideas remain hypothetical, but the fact that they are being openly discussed reflects the magnitude of the moment. Outside observers note that the collapse is not happening overnight. It is unfolding as a slow drift accelerated by new controversies. Each scandal or legal setback chips away at confidence. Each internal dispute adds pressure. Each public outburst makes more Republicans question whether they can tie their futures to a leader whose political trajectory is no longer rising. This cumulative effect is what insiders call the spread of collapse. Public polling has only intensified these concerns. While Trump continues to dominate among committed Republican primary voters, his numbers among independents, a critical demographic, have shown signs of softening. Suburban voters in particular have signaled fatigue with the constant turbulence. Several Republican strategists say that unless a party finds a way to broaden its appeal, it risks repeating the losses seen in previous cycles where narrower margins in key states decided national outcomes. Despite the growing alarm inside the party, Trump remains defiant. He has dismissed concerns as media fabrications and insisted that Republican voters are firmly behind him. In rallies, he frames the internal discord as evidence that he is fighting entrenched political elites who fear losing power. His supporters embrace that message and use it to reinforce loyalty. But the contradiction is that the more he attacks Republican leaders, the more he deepens the divide that is weakening the party. Meanwhile, moderate Republicans find themselves trapped between factions. They do not want to alienate Trump's base, but they also see the electoral risks of fully embracing him. For them, the collapse represents a shrinking space for pragmatic politics. They are confronted by the reality that nuanced positions are no longer rewarded in an environment dominated by polarizing voices. Many are choosing to retire rather than navigate the increasingly volatile landscape. As the crisis spreads, attention is shifted to the future. Can the party rebuild unity? Can it stabilize its message? Can it balance the demands of a base loyal to Trump with the strategic needs of broader national appeal? No one inside the party has a clear answer. But what is certain is that the GOP is entering one of the most uncertain periods in its modern history. The collapse many feared is no longer theoretical. It is unfolding in real time across leadership offices, battleground states, donor networks and political campaigns. Republicans who once believed the party could withstand any internal challenge now acknowledge that the stakes are higher than ever. Some still hope that unity will return once the election draws closer. Others fear that the damage has already spread too far. But no matter which view prevails, the GOP is confronting a defining moment. The world is watching to see whether the party can navigate the crisis, or whether this period will mark a turning point in its identity, direction and influence.